the cloud.
Perfect.
Hello,
Hey, Erica.
Allan, you're back home in your apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
Where are the plants?
We couldn't keep the temperature in the apartment cool enough.
Hmm.
We had relentless heat for almost 10 weeks, where it was up around 100 degrees every day,
Wow.
and there's no air conditioning in these apartments. And so,
Wow. So you've been living 110 without AC?
yeah, 100, 105, but you know, the air is relatively dry, and I have a small little personal fan that blows on me. But like literally somebody threw a switch and the weather, it turned off, like it dropped 15 degrees, 10 degrees just last week. And then the first time since April, we got some rain because we had a severe drought on top of incredible heat. The whole crop season got affected by it, and I couldn't keep the tanks cool enough for my plants to grow. The water temperature was too high.
Wow.
And so I like looked into it. You can literally buy a system that cools the water like it, but it's very expensive, and it's just another level of effort for the home hydroponics. And so I took a break, and you know, it's a lot easier just to go to the market at this point and spend €1 and grab a giant head of romaine or a big bag of arugula.
Mhm.
Chris, welcome.
Hey everybody.
How's
Chris.
Arizona?
Beautiful.
Is it?
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, you're
I
in
should
your
be showing you
Airbnb
the
there?
view outside my window here.
Show us.
All right, hold on. Let's see if I can. Sun's shining. Probably can't see.
Oh
Wow.
no, that's awesome.
Nice.
Mountains and trees.
That's great. How was the drive out? Your trip was okay?
Yeah, it went smooth. We had a great time. Albuquerque was beautiful. We took a tram ride up to what's called Sandina. It's like a big mountain ridge overlooking downtown. And we took a nice hike up to a ridge top, and I got some gorgeous pictures. It was just amazing. It was actually quite emotional for Serena being up there, and she really connected with nature, and it was beautiful.
Perfect.
It was definitely a highlight.
Oh, nice. And she's happy then to be, you guys are settling in a bit?
Oh, it's amazing. Last time we were here in spring, it was the dry season. Everything was kind of brown, and she was a little bit not too excited about that. But it's the summer monsoons, and everything's green, and trees are beautiful. And she just told me the other day she's never had this extended period of time where she's been so joyful, which it's been. I told her it's mostly because of her. I mean, she's really worked on herself and to get to this place, but she's very grateful to have the opportunity to really, find herself out here, and it's a beautiful thing. So it's going great.
That's how you know there's alignment.
Yeah, for sure.
It's bi-directional. When you exhibit the joy, it pulls you into alignment, and when you're in alignment, it reinforces the expression. And joy isn't just like, oh, I'm laughing and I'm happy. It's like it's a state of being, actually. It's on the inside, and it's harmonious, and it's peaceful, and it's tranquil, and it brings in a wonderful just state of acceptance from within. And when you're in that space, the people around you can feel it as well. And when you're out of that space, the people around you can feel it as well.
Well, we're definitely feeding off each other.
And so that's when I look at
us
you
two out here.
Yeah, but when I look at you two, you guys came together, you moved very quickly into a strong bond in a relationship space. You ended up cohabitating very quickly after that. And then you, if I'm not mistaken, applied for like one job.
One job, this one.
And so you're like looking at all these different things. It was in my humble perspective, it's a very narrow pathway that was set up for you guys, and you're just being pulled down it in perfect succession. And so that's that indication. It's like there are a million jobs you could have taken. There are obviously many other women that have come in and out of your space over the last few years. But when it aligns and it's intended, it just steps into space. It just takes over.
Yeah, it's been very easy. That makes sense.
And that's the beauty of it. There's nothing against like having to work at it, for example, but it's not intended to be a struggle. The alignment allows the days to bleed together really beautifully. So, but that's good. It's an inspiration. Nice. Erica, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling well. I'm tired from my work trip, but feeling good,
Good.
high energy. Hopefully I don't crash.
Well,
No after effects of COVID or anything.
that's great.
So I'm grateful for that. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, my mom just got diagnosed yesterday with COVID.
Oh, shoot.
She made it all this far, so it was pretty good.
Yeah, this was my first time.
Yeah. Yeah, we went to the lab just to confirm the antibodies in our body, and the lab said you didn't have COVID. And I was like, how could we were like perfectly symptomatic. It went on for a couple of weeks. It's the middle of the summer. It's not like there's some strange flu bug going around. It's just a bizarre test result. So
Mine came back negative as well.
yours came back thinking, yeah, there's something so the whole system around this thing is so rotten. So wrong. Because the home test that Joanna did had a positive. And then we went to show the antibodies in the blood and it showed negative. As if we had made it up or something, or some bizarre errant bug that just behaved exactly like COVID. So, but I'm glad you're well. It didn't make any sense. It still doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you reconciled any of this, but it doesn't.
None
I'm
of it.
still
none of it-
thinking about it. Yeah.
None of it made sense to us. It doesn't make sense if Minty had what she had and then wound up without a positive confirmation from the lab either.
But when I went and I asked, and I only asked because Joanna said that her results came back negative. So I just, I had acid reflux. So I had to go to the urgent care to get medication for it. So I asked them for the test, and the sorry, my throat, the doctor said they're not so accurate. So either the new strain is not showing up. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
So
I mean,
maybe it
it doesn't make
showed
sense because, yeah, I mean, it could be a subvariant within the new variants
Mhm.
that aren't showing up, but they're infecting millions of people. It's hard to believe that they're not properly testing for it.
Mhm.
I don't know what the agenda is behind the test results, to be frank. There's so many agendas on top of agendas that are now governing what we're experiencing. It's hard to keep track of them. How are you doing, Minty? You lost a friend.
This one hit me the hardest.
I'm sorry to hear it.
Yeah, the best way I can explain it, I've had many deaths in my life. Feels like I lost how you would feel, that empty hole you'd feel if you could end a relationship ended.
Mm.
It's a grief I've never known, but I'm I'm grateful that where there is parting, there's also a celebration of life, and so I'm grateful that it's Leo season. I seem to attract a lot of Leos in my life, so it's just been like one birthday celebration to the next, and that's just helping remind me that there is a lot to celebrate in life. But I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating. I reached out to my psychiatrist to see, maybe put me on medication. I don't know.
Is the trouble with sleeping and eating related to the psychology of losing a loved one, a friend, a loved one, or is it something else?
I believe that it was, my friend who's passed away, then my father with his illness, he is discharged, he's home, but he's paralyzed. My sister with her abusive boyfriend and going through that. And then Jerry's passing. I mean, he was like my birthday twin. We always celebrate our birthday together. He's just, so it was literally like the straw that broke the camel's back.
The overburdened camel's back.
With a really bad back to start off with.
It didn't break the camel's back. It broke Minthy's weakened back.
Yeah. But it's exactly what you have taught us, what you said earlier, is to try to stay in a state of joy as much as possible. I think before you went on vacation, you had asked me to do that therapeutic meditation with a Oracle girl. And what the meditation came back was that I saw many faces, like melting faces, like mask, we'll call it. But so it was like each person that I had met, I had taken on, I had gelded myself into them. So I took onto their grief, their sadness, their burden. And that meditation helped me see that it separated self. Minty, her life is simple, her life is beautiful. But codependent Minty continues to take on, doesn't know how to be of help without taking it on to herself.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. So two thoughts come to mind. The first is, so the advice that I share is just the advice that I've been given for my journey. And when the advice speaks of joy, when we're in a particularly tough stretch, being joyous, sometimes it's just doing things that put a smile on our face. And if you're in a bad state and you just go to like a fun movie just to take your mind off of the struggles, it can be joyous. But the state of beingness is the true goal around the joy. You can think of anger and where it arrives on a spectrum as the opposite point to joy. And so in that context, everybody will interpret it slightly different, but being harmonious, being in balance, being at peace, being tranquil, being present, that's the goal of the spiritual journey ultimately, is to arrive at that place. That is being in the joy. That's the joy. And when you find yourself out of that state of beingness, because life is hectic, or people that we care about are sick or dying, or we're riddled with uncertainty because of the events around us, those are all exogenous events that are pulling us out of, if we've successfully arrived, they're pulling us out of our state of joy. But think of the joy as a big net or a catch-all that refers to that point for you on your personal spectrum of what it is to be in the opposite of being angry, however you can conceive of that. And then when you recognize that you are not in that state of joy, that present, being, tranquil, harmonious, balanced self, then it's using different tools, whether it be forms of therapy, it could be talk therapy, it could be activities, it could be literature, it could be meditation, it could be travel, it could be a whole bunch of different things that pull you out of the heaviness that is otherwise taking you away from your state of joy. And if you're on like if you have a daily meditation practice or a spiritual practice, you arrive in the state of the joy, and it stays like what Chris is describing, they're in a state of joy. Serena has feeling it so strongly that by viewing nature, it brought a positive emotion to her space, and there was great gratitude moving through her. And they're now, as he put it, feeding off each other, because the auric body and the emotional self is healthy and of high vibration in that joyous state. The challenge for you is the recognition that so many things are piling up, and they keep bringing you further away and further away and further away. And then if the Minthy has a codependency going on, where she hasn't created balance and proper barriers, then the challenges, struggles of others are pulling you away and pulling you away and pulling you away. And so that becomes your cross to bear, so to speak, on the spiritual journey, is the recognition of your tendencies into imbalance.
Mhm.
And those tendencies into imbalance in the past may have shown up as addiction,
Mhm.
right? In the present, they're showing up as codependencies. But those are the Minthy, the human self, which is creating an imbalance that's rooted in something that may not be so obvious to you. But it's a tendency that is carrying you into that state of vulnerability and away from the joy. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
And so the advice that the advice that I've been given, right? I'm just a mouthpiece. I'm just a talking. I'm just the voice. It's moving through whatever this complex is that is this incarnation. So it's the advice that has been given to me, which I can share, which you have to decide its relevancy for you. But the advice was to call for help. But it's not call for help like, Lord, don't let anyone I love die, which is a nice thing. It's nice to pray for those who are vulnerable, but it's more, help me healthily navigate this adversity, or bring forth greater awareness, strength, courage, knowing. Help return me into a state of joy, right? Because the incarnations of those, your friend was going to do what he was going to do. You had no responsibility to stop him. Anybody that came within an earshot of me over the last few years, as delicately or as strongly, whatever was coming through me, I was vehemently determined to dissuade them from putting any medical experiment into their body. And if they did it once, I try to stop them from doing it a second time. If they did it twice, I try to stop them from doing it a third time. If they went for the triple, I try to stop them from doing it a fourth time. At some point, I started to give up. I'm like, go for it. But in general, I did my best. And yet at the same time, even when they went forth and did it and would get injured on the first and then get injured worse on the second, and as much as it affected me, it was never my responsibility, regardless of what happened or what I said or didn't say. They were on their own path, and their outcomes were for them to experience. And so if you have a loved one and he has 2 little kids, and you're blaming yourself somehow for not stopping him, this is an opportunity for you to call for help and to be brought back into a state of harmony with self, balance and harmony with the Minthy. Every time I went into a channeled space, it was always the Allan, the Joanna, because we're almost seeing like, oh, the red car, like, it's an object, it's a vehicle, it's a mechanism to carry through our spiritual intention in the incarnation space. The true self is not blaming herself for the death of a friend or a loved one. I assure you, the true self can see the mosaic, the tapestry that is an incarnation space, and all the different threads running through that tapestry with their own color and intentionality. It's not for you to save anyone. I believe the day is coming when there's going to be a lot of orphan children. And it's not going to be anyone's responsibility to save all these children. Those that are going to be called into that role, some of them are already getting the notifications of it. Others will be called to it in the moment. It'll be part of the journey and it will come together as intended. Okay, but it's the human mind that is telling you you could have done differently, you could have been better, you could have convinced otherwise, you have some shred of responsibility for what unfolded. That's the vibration of disharmony that is carrying you out of your state of joy.
So how do you, oh, sorry.
That's the moment that you call for help. Awareness comes to you, the desire to adjust, and then the call forward for the strength, the courage, the knowing, whatever it is, to go ahead and shift, or just to return you to light and love, back into the joy. Go ahead, Erica.
So I keep thinking there's that fine line of what we feel as responsibility. We're here to help. We're here to raise vibrations. And then how do you navigate? And maybe you've already answered it, but how do you navigate helping feel if the responsibility of helping somebody brings you joy?
Yeah,
But then
you're on the right track.
okay. But then you're walking that fine line of I didn't do enough. I need to do more.
Okay, so move through. Remember, you can always gauge the alignment based on the vibration that it's emanating. It doesn't matter what, it could be in your career, it could be Chris in front of his class or talking to a school administrator, it could be in the relationship space. It could be you're in a fight with your partner. You can always figure out the vibration that's present, even in the moment or afterwards with reflection. So it's okay, helping others is joyous for me. Well, that's an easy indication. Then you're intended to be in service. Spending time in nature or helping the land or caring for animals, very joyous for Erica. So that's an easy indication of alignment. I didn't do enough. I could have done more. Right? I'm full of regret. I'm responsible for his choices and I feel bad about it. You start to get into these different spaces of self-deprecation, self-criticism, questions of self-worth. And you know, as you go further and further into that, you're either playing the martyr, like you're falling on the sword for somebody else's poor choices, which is low vibrational, or you're otherwise just unnecessarily self-critical, somehow to assuage some type of guilt that you have, or otherwise to play a role that you're not intended to play. It's carrying you into a low vibrational space. Because the antidote to that is pure acceptance for whatever is. Insofar as the event has occurred, you were communicative where you could be communicative. And you had in recognition that his choices were going to be his choices after you've done what you could to speak. It's in God's hands, whatever God is to you. I kid you not, I was desperate. There's one person in particular in my life, but multiple people, where I was using all of my communication skills, bordering on like manipulation, just to get them to not put that thing in their body. I couldn't do it. I couldn't stop. It was something in their pre-incarnation planning or in their wiring or something that I just can't understand that compelled them to go down that path. And I was emotionally and mentally affected by watching them suffer. But I didn't go into that space of saying, Allan, you could have done more. Allan, it's your fault. Maybe you could have flown there and knocked on his door. You would have saved him. And so that's the borderline, is to recognize the thoughts and the feelings, the words and the actions, and try to parse them out as you're going along. And say, okay, this one's healthy. This is a good thought. Speak your mind. Don't self-censor. Try to help people around you. This is a bad thought. You didn't do enough. You're not good enough. You didn't convince him. Somehow your fault. And if you're not sure, ask for clarity. Go into a meditative state or a quiet state, just call forward wherever you want to call to and just say, could you help clarify these events or clarify my role in these events or give me guidance and insight of what I could have done differently? And it will come to you.
What about sending his fiance and kids light, just sending them energy? If the words aren't, if the words aren't resonating with the person you're talking to, can you just step back and
pray,
send them love?
And that's called praying for them in the traditional sense. That's
right.
I hope that they grow into awareness. I hope that they have guidance to make the right choice. I hope that if they make a choice that doesn't feel right to me, they still move through it and are healthy and well. The greatest example of what you girls are talking about happened after the Holocaust. The greatest example that I know, and keep in mind, I studied the Second War. I was fascinated by a lot of war history, but I studied the Second War. I particularly studied the Holocaust, you had a 7% survival rate among those who wound up in the camps. Seven, and some camps had almost a 0% survival rate because they didn't have barracks. They just had chambers. And so upon arrival, you were ushered into the chamber and then cremated in a pile in the back. And it was just a continuous cycle of just death. And of the 7% that survived, many of them came out of that event and they were all alone. If a family of 20 went in, statistically, if one person survived, that was the average. And they called it survivor's guilt. Survivor's remorse or survivor's guilt. And the amount of heaviness that they experienced and that they had to transcend was overwhelming because they didn't feel that they were worthy to have survived when everyone that they knew was gone. And if you look at the suicide rate among the survivors, it is hard to parse through, to think that they went through that harrowing ordeal and then couldn't handle the consequences of surviving. It would have been the ultimate act of finding the joy after that experience. Some were able to do it, and they went on to live healthy and happy lives. I can tell you from my heart, the four of us on this call, we were meant to be here, and we chose to be here for these times, which means that you're equipped. You're stronger than you think you are. Minty, this is particularly, you're stronger than you think you are. When you feel as if the world doesn't cut you slack, it's because everybody is waiting for you to step into your strength more fully. It's like people can see your potential. You doubt your potential, but people around you can see your potential because you're here for these times. And we all have our own roles to play and our own challenges to navigate. But that's the nature of our being, is specifically to help this planet silently, actively, in our own way. And we're among an army of tens of millions that have come here specifically for that reason.
Yesterday, I went over to my friend Brian. It was his 40th anniversary, but his younger brother was 33. He's autistic, but he came in with his gifts. He speaks to Archangel Michael. He can see spirits, talk to spirit. They talk to him before they go to bed. They kiss him. Like and upon meeting him, like he is really pure. There's like literally no ego in him. And he said his guides told him the light's already winning. We just don't see it yet.
So that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. You can't gauge the progress. Actually, it's not that the light's already winning. I believe what Chris said a few calls back, the light has, it's like, it's checkmate, and they can see the actual number of moves that are needed to arrive there. And you could say metaphorically that the dark is hoping for a trip up or a mistake. Or I think actually more realistically, it's more of an energy of denial. And otherwise, the programming of darkness, it only knows one way of being, which is a self-destructive way of being. And so it's just going to go into that state. That was the video that I tried to post. It's like the cave is crumbling. And those that are not aware that they're in a cave, they're part of the darkness, they're phenomenally vulnerable to the collapsing cave.
Did the video get removed?
What's that?
The Simpsons?
Did you say you tried to post, or the
No, that
video
was a message that I tried to communicate.
Oh, you tried to convey.
Yeah, and I have an audience. They're not the audience is not at this level kind of in consciousness for the most part. It's more of a generic YouTube audience. And so I try to use metaphors and simple examples to try to bring forth the message. And even like the cave, you could argue there's the cave, which is believing that the government and the media are pure and well-intended. And so like that's the first layer, but you can go all the way up in the layers of the cave. And eventually you get to the illusion of the physical realm altogether and the human experience. And you start to see it from a very different perspective, or off-planet influences. And so it's like, okay, let's see what you can get in like 10 or 12 minutes or something just to convey this point. And so I I think the biggest mistake that people make when they're trying to gauge what's happening on the planet is to listen to the people in charge as if somehow, some way they would reveal through the media or through that our leaders any indication that things aren't going well. They can't. They're not wired for that. The best example of this is looking at the Soviet Union just before its collapse. You can listen to people, high-ranking officials, who are like, there's no food on the shelf. Like the industry was like crippling. People had been like, families of 5 were living in like 1-bedroom homes. They'd been on a wait list to get a new apartment through the communist system for like 5 years. The whole system was breaking down. And all the while, the amount of propaganda that was coming through state-run television was incredible. That Russia had never been stronger. The expansion was going, like everything was perfect. That you needed to stay faithful to this. And then like the next day, the coup happened and the whole thing collapsed. But right up until the last moment, the impression that was being given to the 150 million people in Russia was that everything was exactly perfect for the Soviet Union and the loyal people of the country. And so you'll get that same message. They only know one way of being. It is not a creative force, but it's a very determined force. And the difference is that in the past, when like they wanted to take over the world through military force, like with the Nazi regime, when it failed, they simply built on top of it because they were still in control at a higher level. So it's like, okay, Germany fell, millions died. Let's come up with the United Nations. Like, let's come up with different institutions, or let's let those institutions develop and then we'll infiltrate them afterwards. And we can create a greater and greater global footprint through the ashes of the last failed attempt. And the difference now is that the vibration of the planet is moving higher so quickly that the access to consciousness, or the friend that you just spoke of to receive guidance, has never been greater. And so you have like 50 million Americans that never participated in the adults, that never participated in the medical experiment. And you have another 20 million Americans that have grown regretful for participating. Many of them have been injured, but they've grown regretful because consciousness has expanded for whatever reason. When you have that block of people, it becomes very hard to take over a country. Because if they're seeing things the way we're seeing things, or even have a sense of the way we're seeing things, they're not going to just comply with the next set of instructions. And many of them are very well armed. And so there will be a lot of crazy events forthcoming. And it'll be harder and harder as people wake up to get people to do what it is that the others desire them to do for control. Yeah.
So now here in New York, monkeypox is prevalent. And so
Everybody's
people
got the pox.
Yeah, so people are lining up to take the vaccination, the smallpox, and that's one of my concerns. And I believe I reached out to you privately. I'm not even sure, I can't remember. Because I remember prior to being released, I remember seeing a study and it said that Fauci had his hands. He bought some investments or stocks in the smallpox vaccination. And I wanted to know if, the smallpox that I had when I first came to the States, is it the same that they're distributing now, or they're just lacing it with something else? Because on top of my friends here, they're some are quadruple boosted, some are just third because they're not eligible for the fourth. And now like it's a celebration. I got the smallpox vaccination.
No, I'm sure it'll keep them safe, no side effects. It's very honest. The whole system will work for them.
Do you believe it's honest? Is my question.
No, so here that was my sarcasm. So I'll put it to you this way, right? So if you can read, there's some good literature on propaganda and the use of propaganda to promote a message. And the number one technique that you saw, once again, Nazi Germany was the first time as well documented, was called flooding the zone. Okay, so if you have a power structure that has control over the predominance over the media, and they want the public to see things through a singular lens, right? A singular viewpoint, like Russia's bad, let's support Ukraine, you know, or it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Then they do what's known as flooding the zone, which is everywhere you turn, it's all talking about one subject, and it has a very, very binary, very specific, very simple message around what's happening, which is a persuasive message. Okay, so when monkeypox started, so this was like a few months ago, and it had affected like a few hundred people. Joe Biden spoke about monkeypox. And I'm like, never would a president talk about a simple virus that had a couple hundred people infected, typically. But Joe Biden went and said, if it gets worse, it could be really bad. And so in that moment, I went and I bought one of the monkeypox stocks. And it went up and I made like $4,000. And I'm like, that's the easiest money I ever made. And I went to their website, and on their website, it quoted Bill Gates as saying, one day we'll have a smallpox outbreak. And the company's like, don't worry, everybody, we're prepared. I'm like, wow, it's really good coincidence. The president talks about it. Every media outlet is promoting it. You happen to be quoting Bill Gates, and you've developed a remedy. Like, how fortunate are we to have these wonderful people supporting us medically? And so in that moment, they were flooding the zone. They were flooding the zone. It's part of the agenda. We need to get everybody talking about it. We're going to provoke enough fear and or anxiety to motivate people, because the greatest single motivator of the masses is fear. It's fear. And if we can have people in a state of fear for as little as 2 to 3 weeks, we can get them to do almost anything. And so I could say naively, I didn't know if it was good or bad, if maybe smallpox had somehow, mutated, and that this was a genuine illness that was spreading the planet. But the moment I pieced together those different parts that I just shared with you, I knew that it was criminal. I knew that it was a force of evil. And so I went and I did what the evil people do. I made thousands of dollars off of it. And to be honest, I was like, okay, I made a few $1,000. I don't want to be greedy. So I was like, all right, sell it. And then it went up. I was like, I could have made $10,000. I'm like, everyone's got the pox. And then
How come I didn't get this inside info?
I know.
Exactly.
Alan.
We could all be rolling in dough right now.
Well, I'll tell you guys the next one.
All right.
You lost it.
Well, so I did. Yeah. But I play the market every so often. So to be frank, I saw Joe Biden talk about it, and then Joanna's on her Instagram, she's like, all the influencers are talking about it. I'm like, buy that stock.
Throw some money at it.
And so then I went and I looked into the data. I'm like, okay, the media says we're all going to get the pox, and I watched the CDC guidelines. Make sure you wear a mask if you're in the company of those who may be infected. I'm like, wow, is the monkeypox airborne? I'm like, that's strange, because the indications are all oriented around sexual contact and skin-to-skin contact with those with active lesions, pox, that are in a state of infectiousness, like not scabbed over. I'm like, that would be the opposite of an airborne illness. And then, of course, the CDC guidelines spoke of how it can transfer on, possibly, they're unsure, clothing, door handles, surfaces. And I'm like, oh, give me a break. I'm like, yeah, okay, you're gonna go out to Whole Foods, you're gonna be sitting there at the table having your lunch, and you'll be like, I don't know, if somebody with the pox sat here before me, I'm gonna get it. It's not happening that way. It was 98% was in the gay community. The average individual infected within that gay community reported having 10 sexual partners a month. And I was always so impressed with how active the gay community, the male gay community, the female gay community is like the opposite. But the male gay community, it's like, I'm bored. It's like, what are you doing? I'm bored too. I'm like, no voice of reason there. Just go for it. Nobody to say no. It's like, And so the average partner, 98% the gay community, the average partner, the average individual with 10 partners a month, 41% of them had HIV. 41% of the initial sampling of the first 600 or 800 cases of the pox were HIV positive. And then I went a little bit further. 0 deaths.
Mhm.
This was a few weeks ago. 0 deaths. It had 7 hospital admissions because they needed more concerted focus treatment. Meaning maybe the lesions were causing discomfort in the rectum or other areas of the body. I was like, okay, I think I got a pretty good hand. And the average infection lasts a few weeks. So it's a discomfort predominantly in the genitalia, right? So I was like, okay, if you don't fall into that category, like you've already got a very narrow group. It could spread, it could change. HIV of course evolved, but we had a pretty good sense of it. And the fact that it was 0 deaths and that everybody that's full recovery within a few weeks. I looked at the vaccination, right? Highly experimental vaccine, incredibly limited testing, granted emergency use authorization, never properly passing proper trials. I'm like, oh, I think I've seen this movie before. And then to make matters worse, there were already 40 cases of myocarditis reported in the first batch
Of the monkeypox?
vaccine.
Sorry, I want to hear this, understand this clearly.
40
Due to the
cases of
small
myocarditis
pox.
among those who had been vaccinated with the monkey, it's whatever it is, smallpox, monkeypox vaccine. The original smallpox vaccine was having a lot of problems. People don't get a smallpox vax. And smallpox has been largely seen as eliminated for a long time. So this is somebody tinkering with the smallpox vaccine, claiming that it came from nature because nature's your enemy. And so nature produced this terrible virus that's now a threat to all of us. So make sure you go and get your vaccine because that's the only way through it. There happens to be, the company that I bought actually was an antiviral, which had some trials that looked encouraging against the smallpox virus. It doesn't require a vaccination in advance. It requires a pill to reduce the viral load should you get infected. But they're making that very hard to get a hold of. It needs all sorts of forms and approvals. But the vaccine, anybody, they're having trouble making enough of it. So they're telling everyone, be patient, we'll catch up, we'll get the supply that you need. And so the moment, as we move down this path, the moment any agenda piece is flooding the zone, you know how hard it is to get media attention for a singular, like if something amazing could be happening in the world. And unless there's the powers that be above it pushing the agenda forward, if it's just an act, like something like there's a incredible conflict unfolding now in, I think it's Ethiopia, if I'm not mistaken. There's an unbelievable, it makes Ukraine and Russia look modest. And I don't even know the name of it. It will come to me on this conversation, but it is devastating for millions of people. And it's government fighting against dissidents. And it's caught millions of innocent people in the mix. It doesn't make the news because it's not part of it doesn't need to. It's not part of an agenda, so you don't hear about it. Mm-hmm. But the Ukraine-Russian conflict is part of an agenda, and so you can't stop hearing about it. At this point, either you severely limit your media exposure and consumption, or you see it through the lens of ill intention and manipulation. The independent media is different, but anything that has production behind it, it warrants great discernment.
Hey, Allan.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Kim Iverson?
She was my favorite reporter when I was watching YouTube.
Did you hear that she quits The Hill and why?
I love a woman who stands in integrity. Yeah, and it just so happens, because I haven't been on YouTube for a while, I can watch YouTube through a browser, my head stays clear. If I watch it through the app, I block out. And so I realized that. So I was like, okay, let me click on. And I saw her on Russell Brand for 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, I saw that.
And she has been the marquee reporter on this whole, she's been the voice of reason through this whole thing, at least asking some pertinent questions. And then Fauci was invited to come onto the Hill, which is it's produced, but it's a little bit alternative. The other guys on the show are just kind of want them to go quiet so you can listen to Kim for a bit. And anyways, to Chris's to the statement, so they wouldn't let Kim interview Fauci. She was the only one that had real integrity through this whole COVID thing. And the network said, we're not going to let it. And it was never clear to her whether Fauci and the government said, we'll be on the show as long as you don't have that reporter do it, or whether there's so much self-censorship going on within the media because of the backlash and condemnation or whatever comes back to them, that they decide to censor their own reporter, their own journalist. And so Russell Brand asked, like, what would you have asked Fauci? And you're like listening to these questions, you're like, yeah, he never would have answered it. They were all like very direct, simple questions around the mismanagement and the judgment around this pandemic for the last almost 3 years. And they're not going to show up in a space where they get challenged.
Well, I hope she finds a new home.
She has her own show. She has her own show, and she's got she'll eclipse the Hill in no time.
Yeah.
You know, like she was the only one that people tuned. I'm sure the others were okay, but for the most part, you would see the ratings or the views for her show versus the other guys, and it wasn't even close. The other guys are just like nice guys without any nuanced thinking. You know, there's nothing original coming out of the rest of that show, but I used to watch it during the pandemic because she would give the updates and she would question what she was seeing. I mean,
Where's your plants?
I was telling the girls before you came on, somebody threw a switch and put us in a heat wave over here in Europe for 10 weeks. And I couldn't keep the tanks cool enough to sustain life in my second bedroom.
Oh,
The water temperature was consistently like above 80 degrees or something. And so I was like watching them, like nothing's growing. And then I messaged the guys that actually manufacture these, and they said, yeah, you're in Italy and it's too hot.
When you say they threw on the switch, meaning that the elite has the power, the tools to control the weather. And the weather, the extremity heat was to theory.
To impair the crop season,
Mhm.
to help usher in food shortages, and to enliven or to support the debate and thesis around global climate change as a major issue facing humanity that requires great restrictions on individual rights and freedom. So that's also part of the agenda, right? Not the climate change is a specific example, but manufacture a crisis,
Mhm.
use the power of suggestion to instill fear or doubt or confusion into the minds of the masses, allow for suffering without clarity on the source of the suffering to inflict upon those masses, and then after enough suffering, come up with a seemingly last-minute convenient solution. That's the formula. And so those forces have an endpoint in mind. And then they go back to the beginning. They're like, okay, what crisis do we want to create? How can we create suggestion? Where will the fear come from that will lead, and the suffering, and then usher people down that path? Okay, that's the formula, right? You saw it. And usually they tell you it's coming a few years in advance. And it's weird. They always tell you what's coming in advance, because then when it happens, there's less doubt and disbelief. They're like, yeah, somebody said that could happen years ago. I just I never believed that was possible. And then it happens. You're like, holy shit, it's happening. But it's happening because Bill Gates, for example, or somebody else told you that there could be a major virus and crazy pandemic. And then a major virus and crazy pandemic shows up. You're like, wow, yeah, you know, he's so honest and he really wants to help humanity. And he tried to warn us. I think I'm cynical today, guys. And so it's like, and so he went and told us about it. You know, thank God for Bill Gates, because now
He's
we can
so
rely.
smart.
He's so smart.
Yeah.
And I don't know why his wife would leave him, something about Epstein, but it's so confusing. I bet you she's the problem. And then it's like, okay, and then we have this virus circulating. You have to shelter in place. Whatever you do, don't leave your home. It's not safe. And we care about your safety. We're your government officials. And your kids, they can't go to school. Nobody should get on a plane. And whatever you do, if you do have to leave your home, make sure everything is being covered. And if you have to touch anything, use a lot of hand sanitizer. And then even as the data is pouring in, where the places that aren't doing any of that are doing no worse than the places that are doing a tremendous amount of that, the places that have no any degradation of civil liberties, those places are doing just as well without all the anxiety and depression and emotional disorders as the places that have a phenomenal amount of degradation of civil liberties. They keep saying we have to do more of this. And that's California or New York or Europe. And so then the suffering gets higher and higher and higher and hits a crescendo. And then they're like, hey guys, great news. We have the solution that we've dreamed of. The good people at Pfizer and Moderna happened to pull it together in 63 days. And it just took another 8 months to manufacture and distribute.
But why? So there's a lot of control and restrictions over in China. I think they continually go to lockdown, an extreme lockdown. You're not even allowed to go outside. But so yeah, I understand that they want
the
us.
average, those apartments in like Shanghai are like this, they're like a couple hundred square feet.
Mhm.
I mean, they're in prison.
Right. So they want to keep people in prison to lock down so the vibration of fear, anger, frustration, anxiety remains. So that will tip their scale.
That's correct. That's a huge part of it.
And then
Is that the planet is a measurement for the collective vibration of its inhabitants.
But have you seen the videos where people are in stores and suddenly the Chinese government says, okay, we're in lockdown, you have to stay where you are, and people take off? It's like a mass exodus from the store because they don't want to stay there. So I've seen a few where they're just, somebody's filming where all the customers are leaving the store so they can go back, at least get back home and not get stuck there.
Total madness.
and why do they? So it's back to I thought already. I want to say it was either Whole Foods or one of those supermarket chains that people were using the barcode on their body to scan to pay for the groceries. Why do they want? And I think we had, going back to a couple of discussions ago when Chris talked about global warming and that the intention around that was to track us. The intention to depopulate, because the more people they are, some conspiracy theorists will call it, is that the more people that there are, the less they'll be able to control. Why do they want to control and track us?
So you have to see, from their perspective, see the earth as like one large prison.
I see.
Like, you don't really know what it's like to be free. And when I speak of true freedom, it's all the heaviness of the mind to be taken away. The traumas, the abuse patterns, the anxiety. There are other forms of freedom that are granted to some citizens in different parts of the world, but they're still not as free as they'd like to be or think that they are. The objective is to go into a state of complete control or compliance, which are kind of synonymous in this respect, because that power structure that wants to hold on to their authority needs the consciousness to stay low and needs those that are in prison to believe that they're actually safer in prison than anywhere else, and to be otherwise brought further and further down into a state of control through compliance. There is a system, I don't understand it, and we're never going to understand this, but there is a technology, I don't know, they call them these tablets of creation. There's something happening off planet whereby when you are fully asleep, a human that is asleep, your consciousness is potentially being mined. The awaken, and your consciousness is being mined, and the more asleep you are, the more likely you are to participate in the illusion. So you're kind of a worker, or you're enslaved in the system. That's why the Matrix resonated with so many people, because Neo's there and he's on his computer and he's a software developer, but he's really unfulfilled. And Morpheus holds out the pills. And so you take the blue pill and you wake up back in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You go back into the Matrix, you stay asleep, and you take out your neighbor's garbage. You take the red pill, and I'll show you just how deep this rabbit hole goes. And he's referring to the awakened state, which breaks out of the state of enslavement and no longer wants to contribute either their consciousness or their work into a system that is exploiting their being.
Hey, Allan,
Yeah.
those people that are being mined, is it another term for that, like background people? Is something I heard
No,
last week or two. Is like there's hundreds of millions of people on the planet who are just essentially walking around asleep just to be manipulated and mined, and they don't really have any awareness. Is that?
Well, so that's going over. So there, and this is not my expertise. I always, you guys know where my expertise lie. It's like in school, where you're like, you raise your hand to go to the bathroom, you just go.
She's being respectful.
I know. What was that? Oh, it was from Shawshank, when the old man gets, I believe he gets out and he's bagging the groceries, and
Yeah.
Morgan Freeman raises his hands like, "Sir, can I go there?" He's like, you don't have to ask me every time you want to take a whiz, like just go pee. And he's like, geez, for 50, 40 years, whatever it was in prison, I always had to ask the guard if I could go use the bathroom. So Chris, there are background people. Apparently they're soulless. They don't have the spark of infinity. They're
So that's different than what you're talking about.
It's different from what I'm talking about. Sometimes you walk down the street and you see these people are like, this is pure, this is going to prove to be completely wrong. But like the Black Lives Matter movement that was always so incredibly violent in different cities, you'd have like waves of people that would be like ransacking buildings or breaking windows. And they're all hooded, and you couldn't and they're like, who are these people? And you never heard of like profound arrests. You never heard of like who they were. You certainly never got any like exposés or interviews with people who are part of this movement and asked them like, why are you destroying the CVS in your neighborhood? You never had any of that. Those apparently, there's many people apparently that have, I'm not sure, but I believe they've been bred underground. And it's just a very concerted form of mind control that allows them to be otherwise guided and directed. And when they're not being guided and directed, they're background people. They're just going through the motions in almost like robots that just have no real connection.
But you would think we would come across personally in our day-to-day lives, we would come across
But
these
you
people,
may,
and I've never really had that experience from, well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I just don't know.
you
You get creepy feelings
have.
about some people, right? But is
But
that
if you
just-
talk to somebody and you're like, they're just being blown by the winds. They don't stand for anything. They don't have any real family ties. You don't know anything about their background. They don't, whatever they share, you don't connect with, or just feels generic. They're like an empty vessel. They still appear human. They eat, they sleep, they have whatever jobs and such. There is a unique quality to the human. And it usually shows itself like when Serena is tearing up, looking at a beautiful scenery. A profound connection that comes from the heart space. You can tell so many of these politicians or CEOs or media personalities, they never show any real emotion. You can watch a politician their whole career, and sometimes they'll cry, but almost like it's on cue. Like they're like, okay, insert tears here. The human experience, when it's pure, is a heartfelt experience with tremendous bonds of affection that hold us together. We'll watch this part of our discussion like 20 years from now, and you'll be like, that's what he was talking about, because it'll be more the human experience that starts to dominate, and people will once again come together instead of being addicted to their devices and otherwise indifferent to each other's suffering. The population has been infiltrated with DNA and other beings that resemble humans. I saw a whole list of them, and I know one with almost certainty. I know one, and he's a megalomaniac. He's very likable. He's phenomenally crafty. He's incredibly intelligent. And yet when you ask him about his childhood, he's like, oh, my parents died when I was young. I don't really know about my parents. It's like, okay. And then there are lawsuits with siblings over conflicts, so he doesn't talk to the rest of his family. Okay. And every step of his life, something blew up, something blew up. You never once knew anybody who knew him for more than a year or two. And he would promote himself as a great spiritualist and bring you into like plant medicine. And he had his own formula that he said, if you took it, it would give you great consciousness. And in fact, it seemed it was doing the opposite. And you would meet him, Chris, you'd be like, wow, this guy's really smart, really interesting. And then you get to know him a little bit. You're like, he's different than anyone I've ever met. And so I can't tell you for sure if you know a background person. I certainly expect that you would have met them, or otherwise they're there, but they're not a part of your life because you wouldn't be on the same frequency. And so the vibration wouldn't hold together with you.
It's almost like they would just bounce off.
And that happens all the time. How many people do you meet and you're just like, and not like meet like, oh, we're sitting for a dinner party, but you just have a simple interaction with, in a few minute conversation, you're like, there's no resonance, there's no connection. Yeah, I don't know how it unfolds. I hear all these conflicting stories. I know what's come to me, and it's a very intense period, which is what we're in the midst of right now, which is what Minthy's experiencing with the loss of friends and loved ones. We went to our favorite restaurant here in town, and the owner that had been there for 20, 30 years died of a sudden heart attack. And his son took over the restaurant, and we had grown so fond of this old man. He wasn't even that old. We're like, geez, it's just another one just dropped dead. And so it's like, these are heavy times, but these times will get heavier before they get lighter.
Did you get a chance to watch any of the light system stuff?
I watched that video, is like 40 minutes. I watched like the first 12 or 14 minutes, and they're still in like the introduction. And I'm like, oh, I got to move this along. And so I got through some of it. He's trying to convince us that he doesn't need to convince us. And I'm like, it's okay, but let's get to it.
I watched the latest, I watched the discourse one, which was, I think it's a series.
The disclosure 4.
Right. That,
yeah.
I just, excuse me, my throat. I disagree. Maybe this actually, Allan can help along this one. So from the law of one, I had, according to Ra, there are 12 dimensions. Ra only can speak of the 6th dimension, the 7th still unknown. The guy says—
No, densities and dimensions get confused all the time.
Okay. That's
there are endless levels of dimensions. You are a multi-dimensional being because there's a version of you operating in many different dimensions that pull together into a higher self. And the consciousness is moving between that complex.
So dimensions, I always get confused. Can one more time, please explain to me the difference between dimensions and densities?
Do you remember, I'm doing a lot of movie references. You remember Back to the Future when he's like, you are my density. I mean destiny. When McFly tries, you are my density. I mean destiny. So a density is the light, which is consciousness, is becoming more dense in the incarnate or the discarnate, whatever the force is. Not all beings actually go through an incarnation cycle. It's a misnomer, but all beings are being pulled back to the creator. Whatever the creator is, it's not what we think it is. I assure you. You spend hours in meditation, like God, reveal yourself to me. He's like, it's not what you think I am. I'm like, okay, tell me. Like, and so there is a force that we can't quite understand. The universe is breathing, actually. It's not perpetually expanding. It expands and it contracts, it expands, it contracts. So the expansive energy would be, you could see it as moving away from the creator, and then the contracting energy is coming back in. Everybody's on their own journey at different points. The way Ra describes it is as you move closer, or actually as you move further along in your incarnation path, you can intensify more light or consciousness into your being and become more dense. Right? Lead is denser than helium. Right? There's more molecules packed together. And so in the consciousness conversation, it's more consciousness. Okay? And so when you get higher in your density, that means you are further evolved in your trajectory. Yeah?
Yes. Dimensions
refer more to different states of being that doesn't have to do with your level of consciousness. It has to do with the manifestation of the consciousness. And so, for example, if you had a demonic force that was latched onto you, that's an interdimensional being, which is a being that operates in a different dimension. It's not the physical plane, it's on a different dimension, but it's interdimensional. It's managed to figure out a way to infuse itself into the dimension that you find yourself in. When your friend's brother was talking to Ra, or whoever was coming through, Ra, or that consciousness, is existing in a different dimensionality. It's not just a different density, but it carries a different dimension as well. Okay, and when I say Minty is a multi-dimensional being, because your higher self and then other versions of you are happening in different dimensions. Mm-hmm. Some of them are happening with different levels of consciousness too. As this planetary sphere moves from third to fourth density, the veil that has us unsure of our own reason for being, incarnation cycle, and so on and so forth, that will thin. It's the veil of forgetting. And you'll have greater access to your mission, your reason for coming in here, and more access to spiritual gifts, because there will no longer be the limitation of accessing your consciousness. Like when people go into seances, when they go into different ceremonies, they oftentimes are calling to beings in different dimensions, sometimes with devastating consequences of what ends up coming through, because they open up a portal and they invite them into their dimension. And so people often confuse it. They say the planet's going from 3D to 5D, which is going from a third dimensional planet into a fifth dimensional planet, as if there are two added levels of experience that are going to be infused within our being. We're not expected to understand what that means, which is why I put out that video a few months ago, which basically said, don't try to figure it out. All you have to know is that the vibration of the planet is moving higher, and that with alignment, you can embody more light or consciousness into your being. And that will help navigate you through these times and expand your perspective along the way. Just look at where you were 10 years ago as opposed to where you are now. The ascension started about a decade ago. Your being, your consciousness started to expand. Somebody who can get over a drug addiction versus somebody who never does. It's a remarkable achievement. And the vibration, the heavy vibration of the third density that had a hold on them doesn't have the same hold on them anymore as they move into a purer space. That's the pull forward. That's the higher dimensional, higher density being. You don't really have to understand it. I tell you, and even the explanations that I give, either they may be poor explanations or they're just coming from such a limited perspective that I have. And I spend all day trying to understand from the pure sources, and we're not intended to fully comprehend it with the human mind. It's not why we're here. Okay, but that's the crux of what's unfolding.
So Earth is going to fourth density, not fourth dimension, correct?
Yeah, so one set of beings would call it fourth density. Another group of beings would call it the fifth dimension. They're just terms.
Okay.
They're just labeling. Just think about the vibration at the cellular level. The vibrations in your body will start to move faster and faster and faster. It will allow you to increase the density or how packed tightly the light is, which is the expression of consciousness. It is the knowing. Okay, go a little bit further. You have your true self, your spiritual self, an eternal part of your being, the spark of infinity, the infinity spark, right? When it's not in the body, it is just pure light. It is just pure consciousness. It doesn't have a personality even. It just has an existence. It is, metaphorically, you know that term, you're not just the drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean. Okay, when you're not in the body, you are the ocean. You feel that unbelievable sensation of oneness. And I once asked what that was like. And they said, we can't describe it to you because you have no way of experiencing it while in form. But then when I went to bed, they wanted me to try to experience it. And I still can't describe to you what it feels like to feel like you're everywhere at once. But I felt like Elastic Man that had been pulled in a million different directions. I was everywhere. And I came out of, when I woke up that morning, and I came out of it and I was like, why? What is that? But that was me being the ocean. Okay, when you're in the body, your drop feels like it's come out of the ocean and you're just in form. You're just in the body. And so you're not just a drop in the ocean, you're the whole ocean. Your spiritual self knows that you're everything and everywhere all at once as a vibration of creation. Your human self only feels the minthy. And then when your human self takes hold, there's layers and layers and layers that construct your personality, your interests, your limitations. And then they get met up with karma and all sorts of other vibrations that are forming for different reasons from different perspectives. And then your environment influences it. And then the trauma and the abuse influences it. And that constructs you. A spectrum appears. On the furthest end of one side of the spectrum is your purity. And it's pure love and it's compassion. On the other end of the spectrum is the human self, and it's angry, and it's vindictive, and it's spiteful, and it's jealous, and it's hurt, and it's wounded, and it's suffering. These two polarities make up every human being. And I'm not saying you specifically, I'm just saying every human being has these qualities. The most extreme end of this spectrum is narcissism, psychopathy, or sociopathy. Like they derive pleasure from the suffering of others. That's the spectrum that we're on. The objective for all of us is to vanquish the low vibrational tendencies that are carrying us over into this side, and to raise our vibration with the embodiment of pure love. And as you move down this end of the spectrum, you feel once again the whole ocean. If an animal around you is suffering, it brings tears to your eyes. If another human is in a difficult state, you're so compassionate, you just desire to help, because you feel, whether you realize it or not, the unity, the collective. Okay, if you're on this end of the spectrum, you don't give a shit. It's a me frequency. You really only care if it's affecting you. I had a friend in high school who hit a family dog, and he sued the family because it did damage to his Mercedes. And the kids were outside crying as their dog was whimpering. And he's like, I'm going to sue you. Should have been, there's a leash law in New York. That's me spectrum. Okay. Most, I don't know what the number is, 70%, 80%. Most of the planet has polarized onto this end of the spectrum. The majority has polarized negative. There's a group that's in the middle, and then there are the wanderers who have managed to find alignment that are tilting the scales all the way over as far as possible to keep the planet otherwise afloat and from falling into complete enslavement and darkness. That's the spectrum. That's the purpose. When the planet goes through an ascension, the most beautiful opportunity for embodying more pure love comes. Your physical body can start to move into a higher vibrational space, and the ability to slough off the traumas and the abuse patterns and all the low vibrational karmic qualities and personality traits, that actually for the first time starts to come into the mix. It was possible to overcome some of it with incredible amounts of effort, but most people spend their life cycling in their low vibrational qualities. And they're like, oh, I dealt with my anger, and then it manifested as like impatience or frustration. It's just like whack-a-mole. It never really went away. But now it can go away. You can purify it off. And the easiest way to purify is to connect with a being of a higher vibration that actively is pulling you forward. And then you wind up on this end of the spectrum. And this end of the spectrum is really beautiful.
Yeah, the guy I met yesterday, every time he spoke, it was from the heart. He would touch his heart. And he was so humble. He brought up politics, and then he was like, I'm so sorry, I brought up politics. I hope I didn't trigger. And I was like, no, it was this beautiful conversation. He just, everything, thank you so much so nice to meet you. Thank you so much to speak to me. Like, he just was just so grateful, so much of love. There was very little me in him.
Yeah. Well, and so that's an example. As long as it's pure, as long as he's not playing a part, as long as he's not acting it out, as long as it's authentic.
There's a bit of, he says he's artistic, but from what I read, some souls chose incarnation to be artistic because they wanted to bring the pure love, and so that would sort of protect them from the external world that we get involved of about how do I look, how do I feel.
They can't connect with it. Yeah. Because they can't connect with it. And that's true. There's a complexity to all of it. Some people incarnate transgender for reasons, very tiny little percentage. But then there's the infiltration from the wrong side that is trying to convince children you're transgender for a different agenda.
Why do they want to?
Some kids do incarnate autistic, but then there's all the toxins that infuse into our system that create autism as a 1 in 52 birth event.
From the glycosemia. I believe he incarnated as soul planned artistic in order to be, how do I say this? There would be known that so that he was born gifted. He was born seeing spirits, talking to Archangel Michael. He's able to see negative entities and then to break them and to pull them. Like
So I'm gonna. It's very possible. I don't running out of light here. I'm gonna give you another. I'm gonna overlay another level onto this conversation. You guys are healthy with this part of the conversation so far? Right? It makes sense.
Yeah.
So there is a pulling that happens within the universe. And the pulling, when I say faith without alignment is aimless,
Mhm.
which is to say that a lot of people are like, oh, I have faith, I know it'll all just work out. And their life is a total mess because they're not taking responsibility for things, or they're in a low vibrational space. So faith without alignment is just floating aimless. You need alignment, and then with alignment, then your faith, which is your trust that all is as it should be, that actually works. So, but how do you get to alignment? Okay, so that source is pure love. Actually, that source is a destination. If you can, you're an endless, a timeless being, but think of it linearly as if there's a destination. There is a consciousness beyond the universe which has no opposite.
Mhm.
Everything in the universe is polarities or duality,
Mhm.
right? There's hot and cold, there's up and down, there's good and bad. But there's a force that has no opposite, and it would be what we would consider something beyond like pure love. That force is pulling, it's always pulling. It was analogized to me as a parent who has a child and wants the child to venture and to explore, but never to forget about their parents. And so the parents always have this yearning for the child to visit home or to desire to come back. And if the child goes too far away, as if it's completely forgotten about the parent, then the life of the child without the support and the love and the safety may become quite difficult. And so there is a force. Sometimes it's seen as paternal, sometimes maternal, but there's a force that is pulling those that are aligned back. And if you are a high vibration, at least half of the time, 50%, 51% of your time, then you are automatically going to find yourself in that slipstream, which is that pulling. Okay? Most of us, because of the jobs and the media and the challenges like illness and conflict and money and stressors and all these different things that layer on, have a lot of trouble existing each day high vibrational or joyous in that state of presence and purity. Most of us really struggle to be there. Some incarnates take on incarnations where they actively embody physical body that already is at or beyond 51% in their own beingness. And it could be this child that you're speaking of. Some of them go into a state of isolation, like a monastery or ashram, and they spend years in profound meditation so that they're not interacting with the outside world, and they can just quiet the human mind and just bring in the vibration of pure love to raise their vibration more permanently, so that the vibration of their body is past the 50% mark. And so even if their human self screws something up during the day, they're now embodying it. They've raised their vibration, and that means that they're in the slipstream with alignment. And that allows everything to fit into place and for faith to be a cornerstone in their existence. Virtually every profound spiritualist went through a period of isolation at some point in their journey. I think Joanne and I are going through it now. We have like this many friends. I take calls for anybody who reaches out to me, but otherwise it's a very quiet state of being for me for the first time in my life. And I know when I'm spending 2 or 3 hours a day meditating that there's a reason for that. Because I would never be able to spend multiple hours a day in meditation if I had an active social life. And so that's the secret that's not well explained. Is that once you find alignment, every aspect of your life starts to fit together. You need a new home, you're brought to the new home. It's time for you to move. You have almost as if the plane ticket books itself to get you somewhere else. Everything shows itself. So when you meet somebody, they're not meant for you, you can push them right out of your life. You need a resource, it comes right into your life. But until you arrive at your beingness, embodying enough pure love to arrive in that state of perpetual high vibration, you need to overcome the human mind so that you're not carrying yourself into low vibration every day. I got angry again. I had another fight with somebody. I swore off somebody. You know, I went into a suicide mode. I went into a victim complex. I thought my life terrible. Like all those energies are just human manifestations that are being driven into your being from this technology that is designed to keep you and otherwise locked into your human self. It is not you. It is a program that is convincing Minty she can't get over her abuse from childhood, or loved ones that are dying, it's her fault because she could have done more. Or somebody has wronged her in some way from the things that they said, or they were insensitive to her feelings, and so she has to be angry about it. Whatever its manifestation, it's a manifestation of the human self.
But wouldn't they spray chemtrails to keep people angry and in that low vibrational state?
The food,
There is,
the food, trust me, you have been starting for a long time, but the body is able to overcome all of it. But yes, there are endless weapons bombarding you. And they haven't really even activated the 5G towers yet. Wait till that starts. And that's why I say, don't make it worse on yourself by choosing to inject things. It's hard enough already. But yes, there are many challenges. This is a period of great adversity. You need to make smart choices and then ask for forgiveness where you trip up. Make sure you monitor your vibration, find alignment. Nothing is fixed. You can overcome any of those choices. Some people get lucky anyways, and it'll just carry you forward. And as you embody more pure love, you'll know it because it'll spill over. You'll have more joy. You'll desire to care for other people. People will be drawn to your space because you're just naturally loving, or more interesting because the wisdom is moving through you. That's the goal. Monitor your vibration, call for help. Monitor your vibration, call for help. If you go into a low vibrational space, have a rubber band on your wrist and snap it. Associate it as something that's painful because it's actually hurting you. And then, infinite creator, turn me your love and light. I don't want to be that angry person. I don't want to be that victim. I don't want to be that suicide case. Because that is the cycling. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. How long do we spend cycling? It can all be broken.
the cycling's at the insanity, right? The cycling's at the leads a person to addiction.
And you see people on their deathbed and they're still cycling and they've identified as that victim. They're like, lady, you're 90 years old. Yeah, well, my husband back in 1965. I'm like, didn't get over it, huh?
Yeah, my mom, when my father was in the hospital, I got reconnected with my family. My aunt stopped talking to my mom because of something that happened when they were 14 years old, because my aunt didn't like the way my mom treated her when she was 14. So now she said with that, it's a,
So who's being burdened in that equation?
I tried to explain to my mom that her side of the street is clean, and it's my aunt, because for her to be in her 60s and carrying something that had, maybe my mom said a harsh word to her, my mom does have a mouth on her, that hurt her. But now she's 14, she was 14, now she's in her 60s. The harm is onto her, that heaviness.
Well, very much so. I would say that the best way to gain perspective on any interpersonal conflict is to look at intent. Sometimes people say or do things and you're like, I was hurt by what you said or what you did. It's like, okay, fair enough. What was the intent behind what was said and what was done? If you look at the person and be like, you intended to hurt me and I don't want to be around you because I feel hurt. That's over here. Very, very few cases are people actively going out with the intention of hurting. Most often it's a misunderstanding or some perception of inconsideration. And so what actually manifests is the egoic or the human mind, which is defensive, insecure, I don't know, maybe confrontational, misconstrues somebody's sentiments as being hurtful. And instead of looking at the intent, they look at their own suffering and they blame the other person and it erupts in conflict. And then generations later, I don't talk to your aunt. She said something hurtful when I was 14. It's like, did she intend on being hurtful? No, she's actually just got a mouth on her, and that's just the way she is. She's kind of like that with everyone. Okay, so she didn't intend on hurting you. Is it worth carrying that animosity all this time?
And so the conflict, say in their situation, then that will create a karma for them, correct? That
Yeah.
would like to be resolved in the next life, or
And we don't, the concept of karma, all these concepts, they're incomplete. So anything you identify with needs to be purified. So any low vibrational tendency needs to be purified. So if, for example, it was your mom and your aunt, right, in your scenario, and it was your mom that said something to your aunt who was carrying the ill will towards your mom.
Mhm.
So if your aunt identifies as being a victim or being otherwise mistreated by a family member, if her identity, which is her state of being, it's somehow there's a vibration that has her otherwise stuck in a belief structure that is creating attachment to the incarnation, that attachment will manifest itself in a future incarnation until she overcomes it. So if somebody has greed and they just can't get enough money, then they're attached to money, then they might be born poor, they might lose a business, and then some incarnation will give them an opportunity to break the desire. And that's why the Buddha said it is desire for which you suffer. Right? There's something that they're holding on to, which is an identification of a low vibrational tendency, which is hurtful to themselves or others, that needs to be purified. What's unique now is that if your mom and your aunt are third vibration, third density incarnates, and they're carrying attachments or karma, because the planet is moving to a fourth density realm upon their the dropping of the body, right? The end of their incarnation, their spark of infinity, it doesn't come back here. It has to go to another third density planet to continue the cycling.
yeah. Sorry, I would like to share some good news, and I don't want to. It may be presumptuous. So the good thing from Jerry's wake and funeral was I ran into my ex-boyfriend. All the back pains. I don't know. I still don't know, but I believe it was. Anyways, the
Wait, is
day.
he the cause of the back pains?
Well, it happened. The back pains was when after he beat me up, the back pain started.
Oh, I
Like,
beat you up.
yeah,
Because when
and
you said the good news, and then you talked about the back pain, and
right.
then
I mean, there's I
I didn't know that
researched.
I didn't know that there was abuse. I thought about Scorpion in relationships, and it can be pretty adventurous.
No, there was. It ended in
And I was like, well,
abuse.
maybe the back pain started from something positive. I thought you were going down a good path. Like, and he
No,
came
no,
back.
there's no, there is, no, there is. And so, I mean, so I ran into him. He was, and then I think like the day after the funeral, he contacted me and he apologized. And he explained that because of his own fears of abandonment, when I broke up with him, he got afraid. So therefore, he got physically violent with me because he didn't want me to leave.
Because he didn't want.
He-
So he became violent when you broke up with him.
Yeah, remember my Venus in Sagittarius? So my Venus in Sagittarius, when it feels controlled, it goes away. And I don't know, I know he's a Taurus, I know what his Venus is, but he has abandonment issues. So yes, because when I said, I can't do this anymore, I want to break up with you, it got violent. So he apologized, he explained to himself, and I thanked him for being the catalyst, because if it wasn't for him, I would not have found COSA that allowed me to do the inner healing or work surrounding my father, my uncle, and the guy who had, Eric, I just want to say the trauma. And I thanked him for it. And I noticed it's not fully gone, but it is so much quieter, the pain. But the beauty was after the sense of forgiveness to him. I never thought there'd be a day that I would be able, I've always forgiven him in my heart, but to actually directly say that after 4.5 years, it was so light and beautiful and free. and that I've never, I just never experienced something like that, that how much, you hear it in the rooms, that forgiveness is so much freer and lighter, but to fully, like, it was such a gift that I thought, like, I thought never in my life I would be able to actually say these words to him for his own ears to hear, for my mouth to express it to him. And I'm realizing that was what, Wednesday, Tuesday, and my pain is just so quiet now. So I don't know if that's because I was holding on.
You made peace with it, darling. Watch that video with Erica and I on the YouTube channel about making peace with adversity. I think you got the prize for the most challenging incarnation. And I also think you have, you're the hardest nut to crack. I think your resistance to some of these lessons perpetuates a lot of the suffering. I think that's just your design. You just need to be pushed to the brink. And so however many years of back pain were needed for you to arrive at a place of true forgiveness, which you probably weren't even thinking your mind had anything to do with the back pain per se. But the suffering brought in the moment, it's contrition, you know, it's the moment of balancing. And you held space for him because your vibration was accommodating, allowing him to show up and seek forgiveness. His own work combined with your vibration allowed for that conversation to take hold healthily. Couldn't have done that years ago. That's the progress. That's the journey. And congratulations.
Knock on wood, it stays. I don't want to, that's my hope, but regardless is that, and I think Benedict said it too, that, what is it? The Scorpio has the hardest challenge to forgive. I think one of them, what's the Capricorn doesn't forget, and the Scorpio or the Taurus doesn't forget, the Scorpio doesn't forgive.
Scorpio wins a lot of the most. Like anything in astrology starts with the most, or like the most challenging. Scorpio's at the top of a bunch of those lists. It's part of a mosaic. You're fitting a role. You're fitting a role. At some point, you will come out of yourself and you'll just start observing all of these experiences, these antics, these personality traits. You will create enough spaciousness between the human self and the true self that the true self can start seeing the human self the way you're seeing me, or the way you see Erica and Chris. You'll see yourself. You'll be pulled out from yourself. And so in a moment, when you have a low vibrational tendency, you'll be removed from it. And you'll be like, I don't want to do that. That's going to be hurtful. That's going to be explosive. That's going to be self-destructive. I don't want to say or do that. I'm separate from that version of me.
Allan, I have a good example of that happened to me last night. Related to that. So I play poker. It's kind of my third density indulgence. And I really enjoy the game. But so last night Serena said, why don't you go down to Phoenix and check out the card room and go play? So I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna disagree with that idea.
Perfect wife, hubby, go gamble.
Yeah. So I went down there and I basically got wrecked. I got, I'm like, oh, woe is me. I'm the unluckiest person in the world. I played a tournament and this guy kept getting lucky on me and he knocked me out. And in the moment, I was just, instead of recognizing, a great job, nice hand, I just, I kind of stormed out of there and went to the car. And on my trip, it's about a 2-hour drive. So on the way home, and actually this morning when I was laying there thinking about it, I had this realization that I just kind of took myself out of the situation and I kind of analyzed, like I was watching myself in a movie last night. I was kind of in my monkey brain. I wanted to win. I'm very competitive. And I was just kind of analyzing the situation. I was talking to Serena about it, saying, here's what I was doing. Here's what my brain was behaving. And basically I just felt like I was an analyst, I was looking at it from above and just kind of analyzing everything I did. And then I think that's a very healthy thing to do, because now, and I'm reading Eckhart Tolle, and he says the same thing. You want to be the observer, right? You want to take yourself out and recognize it and analyze it that way, but not be in the situation. So it was kind of a very, something that I haven't really personally thought about that way until this morning.
Perfect. To be the objective viewer of one's life.
Yes.
Right? And you were objective. The Scorpio is one of the most subjective signs of the zodiac, which is its opinions are tainted by its feelings and its emotions. And it doesn't always have awareness of those feelings and emotions. But the Gemini, the Libra, the Capricorn, they're objective signs. And so if they need to, they can see themselves or others through a lens that is not being tainted by their feelings. It's just an intellectual or observational moment. And those moments, Chris, like if you pull yourself, so that response was a very human response. It was an impulsive reaction to a disappointment, right? Doesn't mean that you can't say, oh, shoot, like that's not a good outcome. You don't have to suppress the feeling, but the storming out of the room, the non-cordial kind of energy around it, and then maybe the part of your drive or your whole drive was affected by it on the way home. And so it's carrying a vibration with you for a while to come. And that's when the observational self kicks in. And the next time something even remotely similar presents itself, you're like, oh, I got this. Like, I'm ready for it. I'm going to choose a better reaction.
Yeah, for sure.
Joanne and I had a similar moment, because I was a classic New Yorker in a restaurant. Whenever it was taking too long, I would just feel like this frustration kicking up. I'm like, what's taking so long? And we were out for dinner at a sushi restaurant, and there were only 2 sushi sets. For whatever reason, there was no wait staff. And we just didn't know it. We sat down, waited 20 minutes, didn't get any menus, went in. The guy behind the counter is like, here, take some menus. Waited another 10, 15 minutes. Nobody came to take our order. Went in, gave him our order. And I'm like, trying, something's really wrong with this restaurant. They weren't communicating anything. We had no idea. And she's like, maybe it's a test. Maybe you're intended to see if you can go through a difficult dining experience without invoking frustration, judgment, anger, any of those typical low vibrational energies when you're waiting forever to eat and you're really hungry. And I'm like, I think it's a test. I'm like, okay. And like we're talking about, like, let's just be at least neutral. If not, let's be compassionate, because these guys are working their ass off. Something's gone wrong. It's probably not their fault. Anyways, it takes like forever. We finally end up, the wrong order comes out, half the order, it's a mess. But we end up eating something, and we're just being like, it didn't feel natural, but we knew that we were doing the right thing just to be of high vibration. And then like after like an hour and 20 minutes or something, he's like, oh, I've got moved forward. We're like, don't worry about it. You did your best. We ate enough. We'd like to pay. And I tell you, we went in there, there was a look on his face, and he was so apologetic. And he says, I can't charge you after the experience that you had. And I'm like, hey, we still ate a lot of sushi. I know it took forever. He's like, no. He's like, it wouldn't be right. Something like that might happen in the States. It would never happen in Italy. And it was this beautiful confirmation that just by remaining of high vibration through the experience, the indication came to us that we were aligned in that moment. And we get those moments now all the time. All the time. And that becomes the journey. Because the next time you're in a poker room, maybe the outcome is different because you're of high vibration. Maybe your vibration actually leads to a different experience at the table. But maybe you go through another bad beat or something, but your vibration is different, and it leads to a different outcome in the moments that follow. I don't know how it works. I just know that pulling forward is a beautiful thing, and that alignment leads to incredible outcomes that wouldn't happen going the other way. If they did happen the other way, they were just random luck. If they happen going the right way, there's an intentionality that we can't understand that's at play pulling us forward. I tell you, when to really have this sink into my being, it's a beautiful goal to have for one's life. Because even if you don't believe in any of it, you're like, it's all hogwash, Alan, be like, fine, but would you rather be that angry, frustrated guy at the dinner table? Or would you rather be that really kind, compassionate guy who knows that the restaurant's just having a tough night? And so that's the choice that we get to. Do you want to be the guy who gets through a bad beat and is like, fuck this, storming out of there? Or do you want to be the guy who's like, looks the winner in the eye, shakes his hand, and be like, dude, well done.
It's a constant battle with poker.
That's why you're led to it. Right?
Golf too.
That's why it's calling to you. And
Well, it's a game that actually, when I left my first wife, that's all I did for a year. And at that point, I was running really good, and it actually supported me. I paid the rent with it. I'm like, this is great.
You're a good poker player.
I would like to think I am.
Well, if you're paying the rent playing poker, I just buy fraudulent companies that are selling big pharmaceuticals to the unsuspecting. I made in click 2 seconds what it probably take you, but you get to enjoy it at the poker table. I'm like, oh,
Well, for a while, I was thinking about doing it like as almost a profession, like, and I guess, semi-pro, but then, I started having some big swings and started learning some real lessons about it, and ultimately figured out that it's not going to be good all the time. And then, so now the last year or so, I've really struggled with coming to terms with, I keep telling Serena I'm the unluckiest poker player in the world, which is not even close to the truth, but
No.
I keep going back. I can't. At one point, I'm like, I'm retiring. That's it. I'm not going to do it anymore. 2 weeks later, there's a tournament going on, and I just want to, Then I was like, make poker great again for a while. Then it's not working. It's just it's a thing in my life that's just playing with me. So
I'll be a broken record for a second. As long as it's joyous, it sounds to me, on the whole, it's still quite joyous for you. And actually, it sounds to me as if the experience in poker brings out whatever low vibrational tendencies are still resident in you for that awareness. As if to say you could wind up with the best of both worlds, being joyous, playing poker, and remaining high vibrational regardless of the outcome, because you're not attached. You're not attached to any specific outcome. You're going to play your best. You're going to recognize the human nature, and then you'll just enjoy the journey without descending into anything that would otherwise provoke some type of regret or remorse in the day that follows. That's the ultimate. And I'm not saying that you have to arrive there. I'm just saying that that could be a goal to allow you to say, not only do I want to win at poker, I want to win at like the Chris game.
Yeah, be the best, make the best plays, be the best I could be. As long as I do that, not be attached to the outcome. And that's what poker players tell you. Don't be results oriented.
They say that, but then you watch those tournaments, and you're like, look at these characters.
Yeah, there's some really funny characters.
There's some really funny characters, and there's a lot of personality going on at the table.
Oh, it's amazing just to walk into a poker room and sit down with these people. It's yeah.
I think it's great. Erica, how are you doing? We're coming into 2 hours. Maybe it's a good time to start to wrap it up. Is there anything you'd like to share or cover?
Not really. Just I'm thinking about you making money, investing, and Chris making money, enjoying, and I'm the slog outside. I'm the slog working my job, but I love my job. So
yeah, and I lose money investing, and Chris loses money playing poker too.
Don't forget that.
Don't forget that. So
good point.
Most investors or poker players will share their wins endlessly. Like I did short MasterCard when I thought the Russians were going to have a cyber attack on the world, and that one didn't work out so well. So there's the good with the bad. You can only win at so many conspiracy theory trades.
Mine is a little more stable. Maybe not as super fun as yours, but
It is stable, and I can tell you that the gambling, like the investments, it's something that I do because it's interesting for me. But
sure.
you do arrive at a place where you just feel provided for. And I feel like this incarnation brought us to a place where it would just work out. Like it's just working out.
I had a question for Minty that I kind of want to know the timing of the forgiveness with the boyfriend and the meeting of the amazing autistic soul.
This week. So I
Was the forgiveness first, then the autistic? I'm just
first kid and then the autistic or the gifted channeler, we'll call him.
yeah.
Why did you ask?
I'm just sitting here thinking that the autistic soul was brought into your life for a reason.
Sorry to bring back. I did privately message Allan that while I was heavy with grief, I started hearing low music in my ears. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm having a nervous breakdown. And then to answer Allan's email, it only happens in my apartment. But then I noticed when I was going outside, I'd see angel numbers everywhere and I wasn't looking for them. So 99977, car, even feathers everywhere, jasmine. And even like yesterday when I was coming home, as I was coming up the stairs in my building, there was a feather up the stairs. Like I look at the corner, I think, where was I yesterday? And I was somewhere and I decided to step away to breathe. And I looked down and there was like white feathers. Like I was just seeing feathers everywhere. And the gentleman last night said that the music that you're hearing is just really your angels just trying to tell you they want you to be happy and that you're supportive. Which, metaphysically in the spiritual world, they said that, but it's the purity of his deliverance of message that solidified.
So you needed to hear it at the time. And here he is telling you.
I'm still going to see a psychiatrist though.
You'll have to find the right balance between the metaphysical spiritual journey and the medical psychiatric community.
So something maybe you guys can, where is the point of the channeling of hearing? So when I had my Social Security disability interview with the physical as well as the mental. So the questions they asked me is like, are you hearing things? And a part of me, it's like, so how does one discern of what one hears is of the channeling, because one raises one's vibration?
So they're referring to hearing voices typically in the psychiatric community. It's usually malevolent. They're usually bad voices or telling them to do things that are talking to them. It's the typical measurement of schizophrenia. Or sometimes dementia. But yeah, so that this is I think you're well positioned to kind of navigate the medical field there. And if you go to the good psychiatrist and you have a healthy conversation, feel into the body is be sending you signals while you're in the midst of that conversation. In the clairaudience space, right? Clairaudience is a fairly evolved form of communication with an ascended being. It doesn't always have to be an ascended being, but it would be part of the instructions on a pre-incarnation basis. And it would only ever be at your level of consciousness that's coming through to communicate with you, which could be a very high level of consciousness. The clairaudience, though, you have to work on it. It's very rare that an adult develops clairaudience and like the first day they're like, oh, I think that's Mozart. No, it's Beethoven. It's definitely Beethoven's fifth. it doesn't typically come through with such precision and clarity that you can like hear music, for example, in the first day. Now, anything's possible. Anything's possible. But if it's true clairaudience, which is intended to speak to you or communicate with you, usually, from what I understand, it evolves, it develops. Just like channeling usually evolves and develops, or automatic writing, or clairsentience even, the signals get stronger as alignment gets better. And so if you're being communicated with, and it's something that you want to explore further, and you don't feel it's necessarily an act of psychoses or some pathology, like an illness of sorts, start asking for greater guidance and understanding of what's coming. I like the explanation that this child gave you. It's very nice. But you should be, if you're receiving messages, the messages should be able to communicate why you're receiving messages. If clairaudience is starting with music, then you should also be able to know why you're receiving the communication, who's sending it, what the intention is. I would think you wouldn't have to go outside of yourself to know why you're hearing music. Like if you have to move through this process, Minty, I'll support you as I do, but move through the process. Anybody who has done channeling work or communicate with the other side, they typically, the early stages allow them to move. It's great to develop a good understanding of whether it's a positive or a negative force, benevolent or malevolent force that's coming through, and then the intentionality behind it. And then your free will is always paramount, which is to say, if you're not enjoying it, or for other reason it doesn't feel right to you, or you're just not sure you're ready for it, if it's being imposed upon you, that's a red flag. Okay, so if music starts, you don't know where it's coming from or why, ask. And if you're not getting clarity around where it's coming from and why, ask for it to stop. Or if you're just enjoying hearing the music because it alleviates boredom or some other thing, then maybe the time will come when you're being indicated. But my sense is that you should be in a position to know without having to seek external guidance. Not that there's anything wrong with external guidance, but if you are becoming a conduit for communication, my sense is that you're entitled to know who and why is communicating with you.
And I would add that if you get the answer, if you get the answer back of who's communicating, go inside and ask yourself if that's true or not.
Yeah. For
Always question what's coming through, who's coming through.
For every one high vibrational, pure conduit of communication, there's another, I would say 1,000 that are being fooled by some part of a low vibrational construct in an interdimensional space. And it shows up as being good, kind, positive. I'm not saying that, I'm not speaking with any judgment around what you're experiencing. I'm just saying that the ratio between those that are fortunate enough to make positive contact, and even when they make positive contact, it gets infiltrated and the distortions kick in, and you're like, well, it was so nice yesterday, and today it's really angry. It's like, did the source change, or was it commandeered? Was it infiltrated? Why do I feel like shit now afterwards? What happened? There is so much peril when you go down that space. And so it has to be done with a degree of caution and clarity.
I don't feel like any gifts are coming on. I believe that I was just really heavy with grief. And so
So you're hearing music to alleviate your suffering. The process by which you're hearing music. There are a lot of people that are suffering with grief, and they just don't become an open radio. Tune the dial.
Can you explain that? I'm sorry, I just got lost.
There's a lot of people that deal with suffering and grief, but to be hearing music as if someone, some being, something is communicating with you to assuage the suffering. It's a beautiful experience, but it's an experience that is best handled with caution, because it's hard to decipher when music just starts. If you're going through a difficult period, music just starts because, okay, maybe an archangel wants to assuage my suffering, but it could also be, okay, I'm going through a bad period of suffering. Either there's some psychosis, or I'm particularly vulnerable to an interdimensional being that may be showing up to exploit me at this very difficult time. So that's what I was saying. It's not like you'd be like, okay, I want to tune the dial. Like, let me go and change the station. Like, I want to listen to some of the, it's not as if you're in control. You didn't ask, like infinite creator, deliver me some music to assuage the heaviness in my heart. You didn't ask, Archangel Michael, could you please start communicating with me? I need you right now. I'd like to hear some music. The music just started without clarity on where it's coming from and why. And I'm glad that it was gentle music. And I'm glad that this high vibrational being that you came across gave you a positive indication around that gentle music. I'm just saying that the name of the game is caution and clarity. You can speak to, I've on this, with my simple website and my simple YouTube channel, I think I've talked to like 6 or 7 channelers that have come to me for different reasons. And I think I've talked to something like a dozen people who have had demonic, maybe less, maybe like 8 people with demonic possessions. And those that were channeling, there were only 1 or 2 of them that were of high vibration. The rest of them had, in my opinion, had just been fooled with the egoic mind to believe that they had some beautiful being and it wasn't. And the ones that had demonic possessions all started out thinking that there was some ascended being that was communicating with them, and gained trust, and over time made their way into their consciousness and took over. One woman could feel her face being pushed out by the being that was in her head that was trying to be taken over her whole body. She could literally feel it pushing behind her eyes and her nose. But it started out as if it was God that was sending her on a mission.
Yeah. If you can do me a favor, so last month, a couple of weeks ago, I met my friend Brian, introduced me to his quote unquote mentor. She's a Haitian priestess. She does like a reading for me because she's quote unquote a medium. She didn't tell me anything new or exciting or different. I felt a bit general, but then she said that she can remove my chronic pain. And I did have a conversation lightly with Erica that I have hesitation because I want to make sure I'm not going to someone, because she kept emphasizing, you are so powerful, you're so powerful. And it left me a feeling that it was like she wanted me on her table because she wanted to siphon some of my energy.
Yeah, so that you don't know. You can ask for clarity. You can get communication, right? So ask in your own quiet space whether this woman is trustworthy or not. You can usually follow the money on these kind of moments. Meaning if it's expensive to see her, if it takes multiple visits, if she has like a big kind of something set up around it, where there's a marketing or program of like, buy one, get one free or something that feels, follow the money, right? If somebody is about the money, then their motivations may not be pure. And you should be able to feel into, especially in a city like New York, people need to make a living, so you can have appreciation for that. But recognize that there's a balance and a harmony to what they're providing and what you're receiving, always. And then the second thing that I will share is that any healing is limited to the vibration and potential of the individual doing the healing or moving through the healing. Even when you go to a doctor, you're like, oh, that doctor was amazing, that doctor was terrible. It's their vibration, their own state of beingness that's bringing forth the healing into your space. I always had terrible dental work in the States, and I came to Italy, the dentist cost 1/3 or 1/4 of the price, maybe even less. And I had amazing results. And it just happened to be the dentists here are not that, it's the whole system is different. They're not driving Ferraris in these multi-million-dollar big expensive offices on Fifth Avenue or Coral Gables in Miami, the experience was totally different and the results were amazing, were so much better. And so the vibration of the individual who is in service will be the limitation that you can benefit. That's why I say to you guys, you're experiencing my consciousness on these calls. Your journey could take you well beyond whatever it is that I'm bringing forth, because your own consciousness expands and your vibration happens to bring you to a more elevated space. And I just become a simple stepping stone. I don't know, but I can only bring to you what's available through my vibration. And that healer can only bring to you what's available through her vibration.
What does your intuition say, Erica?
About this healer,
Yeah.
I think the quick text that you sent was that she saw that you have a need, like the chronic pain situation. And wasn't it like, I can heal your chronic pain for $150?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that sort of how she stated it to you?
Mm-hmm.
And you felt weird about it?
I feel weird about it. Yes.
I think you already know. I think you already know your answer. Of course, your search. I mean, I understand the constant search to become healed. And well, maybe she's it. Maybe she's it. If I just throw money over here, that will work. If I throw money, but I think you already know that she's not the one yet.
Yeah.
Ask her for a guarantee.
So wise.
Well, if you don't fix my chronic pain, can we do it for free?
Okay, but your chronic pain was alleviated.
It's quieter. You understand these things. It'll go quiet, and then sometimes like this is the quietest it has been.
So then I would say relish in that.
Right.
And,
So, but I'm not like
for the progress that's happened without any patient healer.
I understand waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like,
right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, it's quiet now, but it's going to hit again.
Maybe
it might not.
Correct.
It might not. That might have been the trauma that your body is holding on to because of that relationship.
Yeah.
And your own vibrational, your own vibrational, it doesn't, illness is a bit of an illusion anyways.
Is there any truth to what she says, Allan, Erica, or Chris, that she said that I've never said I was a healer. She said, I can't heal other people unless I alleviate my own chronic pain. And I did mean to ask, because both of you have chronic pains, but the both of you are working with spirits. That hasn't interfered with, and from what I understand, the both of you incarnated with the chronic pain in order to connect.
In order to reach consciousness.
Correct.
Right.
That's different from, I don't claim to be a healer. And actually, I have attempted miraculous healing, and I've attempted like demonic clearings, and I've tried all sorts of different things. It's where I started the conversation. I'm just the mouthpiece. I'm just the talking head. I'm the representative. You know, like it's, so if I make a request, I'm making a request that I happen to have a connection to something beyond the physical realm that can locate an individual and perform the healing. Mm-hmm. Christ used to say the same thing. Mm-hmm. Say the same thing. And somebody said, thank you, you healed me. And he'd say, your faith healed you. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't do anything. Your faith healed you, which meant you were aligned enough that I could make a request and healing would happen. And so if somebody says, I'm a healer, right? It could be their journey is different and they believe that they physically are doing the healing. But most that are profoundly aligned on their spiritual path know that they're just a conduit for the healing to occur.
And that you could possibly heal yourself. She's seeing your power. Maybe this is an outside. You get a lot of very physical outside validations, like with your feathers and
the numbers. Yeah, those are the synchronicities. They're proving alignment and indicating that you're not alone and reassuring you to keep going, without all the doubt and questioning. Like the times that we speak, I almost always say the same thing. I said, I'm in your service. So if you want to go into an intellectual space and ask me 100 questions, you guys know me well, I'll give you 100 answers. But the real value that I can offer you is to bring you back to yourselves. Your vibration, your faith and alignment, raising your vibration, connecting to higher beings, moving down your path with good judgment. These are your responsibilities. I can always try to bring you back to yourself. So if you want to be in an intellectual space, I'll hang out with you there, but only optimistically until it exhausts itself. And then you realize that you're just not going to figure everything out, and bring you back into your joy, bring you back into balance. Right? To the point where, just like Chris, he can walk away from a poker table and still be joyous even after a bad beat. He'll get there. But you can have a bad fallout or a conflict or a difficult moment with somebody and still in your heart find compassion, recognizing that they're doing the best they can, and not say something that you could apologize later. It's nice to seek forgiveness, but you've already emanated a vibration that has been a burden for you. And now you're trying to resolve it. You'll arrive at a place where you can observe them and be like, oh, I know this is a typical trigger moment. I'm not going to descend into anger or the victim or the wise, the need to know. I can move past the human mind, even in a state of suffering, give up on it. I've been doing this for so many years. It's not getting me where I want to be.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
And so it needs to fatigue you or exhaust you to the point where you surrender. You're being provided with the tools to find alignment beyond the surrendering of the human mind. It's hard to surrender where you don't know where to go. It's easier to surrender when a roadmap is being painted before your feet. And what Erica's saying is spot on. Most people go their whole life, they don't see sequences of numbers or feathers or other indications that say that they're not alone. You're seeing them all the time. But if you're still going into doubt and questioning and unknowing, if you need to know whether or not this healer is right for you, ask or sit quietly and set the intention for the information just to come to you.
What are your feelings in regarding the pendulum of, like, as the clarity? I don't feel like when I studied the Akashic.
But you're still doing it though. The
Still
pendulum is the pendulum for you. The Akashic records are the Akashic records for you. The tools, the different events that'll happen in your life, it's for you to be able to feel into them, to quiet that mind, to feel into them, and allow the knowing to move you through each of those events. You just won't be able to ask the world every time something happens whether or not you can do it, you should do it, where you should go. It's going, you're going to struggle too much if you're dependent on the intellectual mind to develop relationships with people who you think can bring you the answers, when the answers are all waiting to move through you.
I think a pendulum is to increase your confidence in what you're getting, but really you don't need any tools.
Yeah.
It's all in you and how you feel when you get the answers.
Yeah. So if in that moment the pendulum seems to be a help in gaining confidence, then that's a knowing that you'll have and enjoy the pendulum. And if the moment comes when the pendulum doesn't seem to be valuable, or you've moved beyond it because you can just feel it in your body, then let go of the pendulum. But Chris, Erica, and I, we wouldn't know whether the pendulum is right for you.
No, I think when I studied the Akashic records, she taught us to see the pendulum, but the pendulum didn't feel accurate. If I am quiet enough in my meditations, I feel more confident in, because the pendulum can only say yes or no, and I don't know who's playing with it, no matter how much clearing that I do. And sometimes even the pendulum, is it Bob Marley that said this? He said, when you're in a decision, feeling indecisive, toss a coin. While the coin's in the air, whichever wish you want, when it's in the air and what you wish for is what's the answer you should follow, right? Basically, the coin is not deciding whether, I should go see Allan or not see Allan. But while I'm tossing the coin, I go, I really like to see Allan. That's my answer. That's how the intuition. I do have, and it's still the human, it has a lot of doubts in me, which is why I'm always seeking, and it's my natal chart too. So it's constantly seeking
It's be gentle with yourself. It's part of the process. It's part of the process, but be optimistic that you'll transcend this part of the journey.
Chris or Erica, do you both have those questions, or pretty much solid in your intuition and self?
I mean, for me, I don't really study or think intellectually about these things at all. I mean, I read The Law of One. I'm reading an Eckhart Tolle book now, but it's almost like I'm going purely on feeling in my day-to-day life. Yeah, I'm just going on intuition. I'm letting the river kind of take us down, and I'm just funneling into whatever's the path I feel like is the one that feels right. So it's mostly intuition feeling for me.
And look at how well it's working. That intuition feelings for you kicked up in a high gear when it hit you that you needed to get out of your marriage.
Absolutely.
And the alignment was there, and then it just took over. Yeah, and that's your way of being. Minty, I was more like you. This mind was very active. And just this year, I'm moving beyond the whys. The what's and whys, like, why would that happen? What's coming next? It is not only exhausting, but it's self-defeating. You can't, human mind is designed to be so incredibly limited. Don't think that you can use it to figure it all out. Are you reading The Power of Now, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah, it talks about it in The Power of Now. It talks about like how much information is like in a DNA strand or something. He talks about like this enormous amount of information, the smallest little drop it's like, don't try to figure everything out. There's way too much out there. You're not designed to figure it out. There's angelic support that has it figured out. That's just asking you to quiet the mind so that they can communicate and guide you forward as you need to. Your human mind, you are comprised of 10% human mind chatter and 90% stillness. 90% intuition, 90% knowing, however you want to put it. If that 10% is so dominant that it's crowding out the other 90%, you're doing yourself a big disservice. And actually, as you move, in my communication earlier, as you move down the spectrum into pure love and you embody more of your spiritual self, then the 10% becomes 9%, becomes 8%, becomes 7%. You squeeze it down to nothing. You become like Eckhart Tolle. Maybe not that far. He's totally zenned out all the time. And he's an open channel. He's got all this wisdom moving through him. Because there's no human mind left. He went profoundly into spirit. But when the 10% is like, it's like when you've got a room full of people and one of them is like a little child who's got like noisemaker, or he's got a piano or something. He's making so much noise, and the other 9 people are just sitting there quietly. And all you can pay attention to is that rambunctious little child. That's the human mind. On overdrive, constantly getting your attention, interfering with the knowing that is just available to you all the time. And this spirit is like, let's send her a feather. Maybe she'll go past the human mind for a moment. Let's give her some numbers. Maybe she'll go past the human mind. They're like, and they're tireless. We'll just keep doing as long as the incarnation's going. But your responsibility is your vibration, and recognizing that the mind is going to carry you into doubt, questioning, needing to know. It's all part of this construct. It's never satisfied. You never reach a point you're like, okay, I know enough. My human mind doesn't need any more information. I got all the information. That part's done.
Check.
Check. I'm smart. I finally feel it. I'm like an encyclopedia. Check. It doesn't get there. Never gets there. It finds another reason, another something. Then it forgets something that it learned a year ago. And it's like, shit, I got to go back and relearn that. One drop came into the sponge, but the sponge was already soaking wet. So a drop fell out the bottom. Quieting the mind, moving past the mind, just being present, tapping into the joy. It's very hard in New York. It's very hard in a small apartment in Queens. It's very hard perhaps in the recovery space and some of the personalities that you have around you. It's very hard when you lose a good friend. It's very hard with the stressors. It's very hard when everyone's telling you to get the monkeypox vaccine, right? And all the different things that keep pulling you back into the mind, but it's possible.
But if it was chosen, there's a particular reason why I'm here, right? Like for all of us. For you right now, this is your sense of.
But I'm in alignment. Chris is in alignment. I can tell you. I talked to Chris. It's calming.
Erica too's alignment. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I believe so. I don't know. Erica can tell you if she feels in alignment.
Are you?
Yeah.
And so Minty, but your journey is different. And so are you in New York for a reason? Or is it that New York and the circumstances are ushering enough suffering in the effort to propel you out of your state of beingness so that you can arrive in alignment and get the hell out of New York? It's very possible that the adversity that you're experiencing on some level is still intended as a catalyst for you to choose pure love and the high vibrational essence of your being.
So hard for Scorpio. We always choose death. We always choose violence. So first, I'm funny, but I'm not funny because that's the first thought, violence. It chooses violence. Mars and Aries chooses violence first.
The Scorpio, with all your fire in your chart, the Scorpio that reaches consciousness and transcends its own inner suffering is a very powerful force to be reckoned with. It has compassion that does not exist easily elsewhere. It can be incredible value to humanity. Right? But I don't have all the answers why you are who you are and what you chose. I just know that being of high vibration and walking away from a bad beat on the poker table with a smile on your face and a hand outstretched is better than being frustrated and letting it seethe with you on a 2-hour drive home. And that analogy will apply to all of us sitting at a sushi restaurant for 1 hour and 20 minutes to get some nigiri rolls. You know, and Joanna's like, let's see if we can be loving and compassionate. We're like, tranquilo.
That's actually been my mantra the whole summer. Tranquilo, 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 tranquilo.
Okay, I'll let it stay with you. Guys, speaking of sushi, I'm gonna go get a bite.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Can we schedule for next month?
Yeah,
What
if
date
you'd like.
works,
Sure.
guys, girls?
Sure.
Sure, we'll see what the fall brings. The spiritual community is abuzz. The autumn kicks off the next wave. You can feel the intensity picking up everywhere. At least I can feel it. Governments collapsing, all sorts of economic events
It's a typical year.
You feel that? Just another typical year. How many illnesses can circulate at once? Go ahead, Minty, suggest a date.
So, Chris, you start school. So is it easier? The Labor Day is the 3rd is Labor Day weekend. So Erica, I don't know, you guys have holiday plans? Or do you want to do the 10th?
We'd usually do the 10th or the 17th.
Right.
Either one for me. I have
Erica,
nothing on my calendar right now.
10th is better.
10th is better.
10th it is.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So glad to see you and Erica. You both recovered from your COVID and there were no damages. Yay, your light's still bright as ever. Congratulations, Chris, on your beautiful, beautiful journey. And so
Thank
happy
you,
you made
Missy.
it there. Perfect. All right. I'll send over the video when it's uploaded. Thank you, everyone, for everything. Much love and light. Bye.
All right, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful month.
Good to see everybody.
Ciao, ciao.